You are now listening to Creative Hora.
Hi everyone, welcome to Creative Hora. I'm Dalia.
And I'm Mary.
And we're so excited to welcome you back to another episode with two friends.
Yeah, we're back, friend. But you know how we like to kick things off before we get down to the nitty gritty of our updates with our creative projects or like just any life updates in general too, of how we're really funneling into our wellness creative toolkit. We like to take a step back and just do a quick friend vibe check. So friend, how have you been today or this week? However you see fit, whatever fits your energy. So what's the vibe, friend?
Yeah, friend, thank you so much for that question. I always appreciate this moment to just get centered and be present with how I'm feeling. I would say in this moment, I'll be honest, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. And whenever I'm feeling a little anxious, I really like to focus. Whenever I'm feeling anxious, I really like to focus on, being kind to myself in that process, because typically I can be really hard on myself and I'm trying to be more compassionate. And then two, really tap into specific things that I know will ground me. So, for example, today I'm gonna go to like my roller derby practice. I went on a nice walk. So when I'm feeling more anxious, I'm trying to tap into the things that help me feel less anxious. I had my tea here as well.
I love that for you, friend. And I'm excited to hear more about your Derby Chronicles. I know the audience is too. And I'm super proud that you have just the tools to that you tap into when you're feeling anxious. So appreciate you sharing that, friend.
Yes, friend. Thank you so much for listening. But how are you feeling? How are things for you today as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think today, if I can describe it in one word, I think I like honoring self. I know that's two, that's actually two words, but I think like there's a part of me today specifically where I really honored myself in the workplace.
Mm.
And it's interesting because like I'm not really used to it, but I've done it a couple times in the workplace where I've just set really clear boundaries or expressed clear emotions about how I feel in terms of certain projects or certain things that don't align with me in terms of workplace culture or workplace habits. So yeah, I think today I felt that honoring self and advocating for self emotion just really went through me. um so yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
I love that, friend. I love that self empowerment and, speaking up in the workplace is such a challenge. I think it's one of those things where we have normalized like burnout and just giving so much to a workplace environment. So yeah, we were talking about this before we jumped on, but like I said, friend, I really respect what you've shared about showing up for yourself and vocalizing your needs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a work and a practice in progress, I would like to say, because it's something that's um I think in my career, like I try to really practice, especially as a woman of color in leadership role within
Mm.
healthcare. I think it was very, I guess, like the magnitude of expressing and voicing how I feel became very like just apparent and pronounced, especially in this role that I'm in. So grateful for that, but definitely not easy. So
Mm.
thank you for recognizing that, friend.
Friend, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I know that, typically at this point, we like to switch over to what has become one of my favorite moments with you, friend, which is diving into a card selection for a topic of this episode.
Yeah, and again, just for reminders for the audience, there's different cards that we pull for the episode, and each card is color coded by category. So I'll say it one more time, where gray is the gray category is dreams, yellow is life lessons, a teal green is exposed, blue is courage, an orange category is beliefs, and then a darker blue is self-awareness. I'll take this one, friend, and just because today I felt courageous and bold, I'm gonna go with the courage light blue color. I think we did that last time too, but that's what I was feeling at the moment.
Now let's do it, friend.
Oh my goodness. All right, I have one. And the question is, tell me about a time that you fought for yourself. That's so
Wow.
funny that I pulled that question.
Oh my gosh. I love
Wow,
this. This is such a great question.
I know. And that was the first one I pulled. I'm happy to start since it's fresh. It happened today. Yeah, and I think in mentioning our in our vibe check friend about like how I felt about honoring myself or just yeah, creating that space to advocate for myself. Yeah, a time where I fought for myself was literally today in the workplace where I was asked a few weeks ago to take on more responsibility. And I have been told that there's a role for me and whatnot in terms of career growth. But it's been going on for months, like this kind of lip service type of work that's been going on. And when I was approached to take on more responsibility before I can see any clear transition of my career growth, I actually had to take a step back and really identify like, does this align with me? Does taking on more
Mhm.
would lead me to this again, I haven't seen it into fruition, but this new role which would equate to a career growth. And I feel like again, like it's just been so long to see any progress.
Mhm.
And I think I get it in organizational structures and bureaucracy and just like in quotes in corporate structures, how there's so many politicalness that is involved in terms of getting approvals from 1,000 different people. And I get that part and I respect everything about it, you know, the traditions of an organizational structure. But it was actually time for me to make that decision of whether or not I'm
Mm.
taking on this added ad hoc responsibilities. So today in my check-in, I actually it was almost like forced onto me because like this person is transitioning from the organization, and my boss is like, "There's only 1.5 weeks left to figure this out. Like, what's happening?" And you know, while in summary, I said, you know, while the work aligns with me and it excites me, I'm not comfortable taking this on
Mhm.
without a proper, clear transition of my role. And I also said, like, with the responsibilities I have, I don't have the bandwidth to take this on, frankly speaking. And at first, it was interesting because there was a slight defensiveness in the receiver of
Mhm.
this boundary, where my essentially my bandwidth was in question, alluding to like, I don't know if that's a bandwidth issues versus an uncertainty issue of the clear transition of like the growth within the role. But and I was also quick to again like fight for myself and say, I don't think it's fair for you to question my bandwidth issues.
Mm.
Frankly, because I'm the one there taking lead on multiple sites. So I think it just felt like, yeah, like I fought for what my intuition felt right to say and fought for myself in terms of advocating that, hey, me taking on more responsibility doesn't mean that you see my value. Like it needs to talk in terms of career growth and transitions. So yeah, I mean, I think it was a process of honoring just the intuition I had in terms of saying no first and foremost, and then fighting for seeing something more tangible that resonates with the value I bring to the organization and not feeling any guilt or reaction or strong emotions about the way I responded, but really staying true to like my voice and the power that had for me.
Friend, thank you so much for sharing that story. The reason why I just appreciated hearing that is because, a lot of the times, especially in a work environment where there's power dynamics, and you mentioned it being a woman of color, it is so difficult to advocate for yourself and be able to position your boundaries. And I feel like you articulated that in a way that was so powerful. You really acknowledged that the work that they were asking you to do is something, this is interesting to me, but, you don't have the title and or, the compensation that's attached to that type of
Right.
work. So you're really just honoring your self-worth in this role. And I really respect that. I think that is so beautiful. And I personally can learn so much just from that story that you've shared and the way that you've done it in such a professional manner, but also in a way that really, really highlighted also what your goals are in the role, which is like you're trying to get your promotion, you're trying to secure the
Mhm.
next, the a
Secure the
movement.
bag. I don't care.
Yeah. But it's really powerful. And I think it's so important, especially as women of colors professionals in the corporate world. This is incredibly powerful that we're able to advocate for ourselves
Mhm.
and be able to communicate that with leaders and usually, people that are in power in a way that makes sense and still honors ourselves.
Yeah, right now I appreciate it, but want to hear from when the last time or a time, it doesn't have to be the last time, but a time where you fought for yourself.
Yeah. As I was thinking about this question, I had a moment first where I was like, just like an awareness where I'm like, oh my God, I
Mhm.
can't remember the last time I advocated for myself outside of a work environment. Like the only examples I could come up with were like
Isn't that wild?
advocating. Yeah, I was like advocating in a work environment. Like I could come up with like two, three examples, right? But I was like, in other areas of my life, I really struggle to think about where I've advocated for myself. So that's
Mm.
one thing that I just want to acknowledge.
Mhm. Mhm.
But the second thing is, I do have an example of when I advocated for myself. It's also it happened in a work environment,
Mhm.
'cause,
Mhm. We love
but
that.
yeah, it happened in a work environment, and it really was. It was during the time when I remember, and it was like in such a small way, but, we were in the time during COVID where, recall
Mhm.
everyone went virtual, and there
Mhm.
was, folks that everybody basically we all went virtual and we were used to being in an office environment. And I remember like that there was a manager, this was early in my career, there was a manager that was like really trying to make it like very like, "Oh, homey, we're gonna connect with each other. Let's show each other like our workspace." And like they wanted us to do a whole tour of like our
Mhm. Mhm.
workspace. I remember that at that time I had moved back home with my family, and we lived in a
Mhm.
very small apartment. It was like a two-bedroom
Mhm.
apartment where
Mhm.
like I didn't have a dedicated workspace. I mean, I just had my laptop and I
Mhm.
was like visiting family. I was there. But I was like, but I remember this manager went first and he showed us his workspace. And oh my gosh, dude, it was like this man lived in a mansion. He was like, this is like my window, my desk by the window. This is my like everything. Like he had a
Mhm.
big ass house. And I remember I was like, how is he going to expect us to show our workspaces? And at the time, I was pretty close to my colleagues. And so I understood that a lot of us probably didn't have this type of workspace.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I remember in our one-on-one, I had heard from other people. I'm like, this people, I personally wasn't comfortable showing my space. So I literally like, I straight up told him, I said, like, I think this is, I think this is great. It's a great way for us to like bond and get used to this environment. But frankly, I don't feel comfortable sharing my workspace. I think we all have different
Mhm.
work environments, and a lot of we're living in, some of them are working in us living in SF. You sometimes just have a little corner. So yeah, just like bringing that awareness to the manager. And honestly, it was something that
Right.
everybody felt and no one was saying anything.
Mhm.
But I just remember how uncomfortable I felt when he was showing me his workspace. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was just in addressing that. And I guess like my takeaway from that situation is that I realized that in advocating for yourself in a way you also support advocacy for
Mhm.
others. and
Mhm.
and at least that's the hope in my situation, that I think that
Yeah.
hopefully there was a way that also in advocating for myself and my needs, it also it stopped everyone else from having to do that as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's my reflection on that. But yeah, I think there's a lot to reflect on, friend, on this, even in the ways that we're expected to show up in our work environment. But also for me, a reflection on like what are some other ways that I can advocate for myself outside of work, and
Mm. Yeah.
be able to prioritize that energy as well. So this is a good question. It was definitely a very important question.
That was, friend, and two thoughts. Like, I think one, you're absolutely right. The first thing I thought about was a work-related situation. But to your point, like, in reflecting back, like, how does this look like in my personal life in terms of advocating or fighting for myself? And how do I take that on? Like, yeah, in just my personal life. And then two, in terms of your experience, like, you're also right in terms of, yes, it was a moment you fought for yourself in terms of, yeah, expressing how you felt about the situation. But to those in your team, you literally, the cliche, like, you took one for the team by standing up. Because I'm sure, well, I'm not sure, but there might be folks on your team that weren't also comfortable. But if you hadn't said that, who knows, like, who could have, intervened also and shared their discomfort. I think, yeah, it goes back to that, like, saying something and just not, it's not really for the individual, or it could be, but also for the sake of just the people around you or the community. So yeah, I appreciate that story, friend.
Thank you, friend. But I know I'm really excited to catch up on our creative
Yes.
projects. I know there's been a lot of changes since we last caught up. And so, friend, like let's jump in. I'm excited to hear about updates on Haya, and I'm excited to also share some updates on my creative journey.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Haya is a good position right now in terms of, it's not a lot of new updates. Still figuring out next steps with the future of Haya, of future of the endeavor in terms of outside of the current relationship we're in now with the county. So just really going back to the drawing board and reassessing. I think we're in that reevaluation phase as the league is close to being done. Um Monty and I, and just as a disclaimer, like, I know we're excited to talk to her in the future, in the near future, but we are in this phase of um hitting of like reevaluating and looking at, okay, what does our vision look like, and what does this mean for the project and for the community that we're building moving forward, kind of like a 3-year vision plan or projection plan. I don't want to use a corporate termy
Yeah.
corporate terms, but kind of like a 3-year plan, but more so on our vision and what aligns with us feeling wise. So yeah, I mean, I won't say too much there because I do want our conversation with Amani in the near future to like shed light there, but
Yes.
would love to put it back on you, friend, to focus the mic on you, and would want to hear about, again, you mentioned a little bit about the derby, but also of this life project that you've been investing in. So turning it over
Yeah,
to you,
friend.
friend.
Yeah, before I, jump into that, I want to say that, it's so interesting that you're in this point where, the project has launched, you're
Yes.
enjoying that moment, and
Yes.
now, like you said, like the creative process still continues, like you're back to the
Mm-hmm.
drawing board,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about that future vision, and, going beyond, like you said, this county partnership, really just going back to what you and Amani really vision to do with the brand on a larger scale.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm excited to hear about what creative ideas come from that. from this moment of you to reevaluating your project. So yes, we will definitely tap more into that with you and Amani. But to your point, yeah, I'm excited to catch up around my creative journey. I'll be really
Yes.
upfront. I feel like it's been a couple of challenging weeks with prioritizing my creativity, um,
Mm-hmm.
which I think has been a different challenge. What I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is in the previous episode, I talked a little bit about my excitement to, writing blogs for Creative
Yes.
Hora,
Yes.
jumping into roller derby and joining a
Yes.
community. I felt like, I'm like, okay, things are going in terms of my creative project, like things are moving and I'm excited into what I'm tapped into. I found that, after going through the process, a couple things started to come up for me, both in this
Mm-hmm.
process of the creative journey. And I think it was an aspect of for example, once I had something consistent with Derby, where I've been part of this club now for I think like 5 weeks now, um,
Wow.
I realized that I stopped prioritizing roller skating time alone. Where in the past I was putting on my skates with my niece, and we were,
Mm-hmm.
just for fun, just movement. And I stopped doing that when I joined the roller derby team. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if it's because in my I thought, okay, now I have this dedicated time, so that will be the dedicated time. So I think one lesson from that I'm reflecting on and I'm learning is that when it comes to our creativity, it's something that it's consistent investment. It's not something where, oh, once
Yes.
you have that dedicated time,
I
for me,
agree.
it's on Wednesdays. I can, it stops there. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
potential when it comes to creativity that I did feel the difference of stopping for like 2 weeks and a half, 3 weeks, that skating alone for fun with my niece. Like I have felt the difference. So I think that's one thing that I realized in my creative journey. I was like, I need to be more consistent with the things that I like, I love, and I'm getting a lot of inspiration and fulfillment from. And that also relates to my second creative project when it came to writing.
Yes.
There's moments in our creative journey when we have spurs of inspiration. There's just a lot of, you're in a bright spot in your creativity. And then when those moments happen, and we've talked to many creators who talk about that creative block period, it's really difficult to try to like jump back in. But that's what happened with me in the blog. I was really excited about doing things live, sharing updates as they were happening, as I was getting spurs of inspiration. But when I hit that plateau with my even my roller skating journey, which I mentioned, I stopped doing the roller skating for fun, that movement. I also hit a plateau with my writing, like a standstill. And I realized in those moments, that's when like all the pieces started coming together, when it came to creativity and being very intentional about, filling our cup and really just empowering myself to have the wellness toolkits so that I can jump into that creative journey once again. And for me, it started in even this week. It started progressing in smaller ways, where I was like, okay, so maybe I'm not ready to like fully put on the skates and come back like 100%, but I'm gonna start inspiring myself again by like coloring. Like I took out my coloring book. Because that's such a simple way for me to dedicate some time to creativity. My niece likes to color, so I'm coloring with her as well. So it's this
Yes.
also small way to connect back. But yeah, I would say it's been a few challenging weeks when it comes to my creative journey. I hit a couple creative blocks. I'm working on being kind to myself in that process as
Yes.
I
Yes.
work to slowly like melt away some of these creative blocks, and yeah, and like doing so in small ways while still being kind to myself.
Yeah, and I think you like I had a question, but then you quickly answered it in terms of how you're responding to your creative block. And I think to your point where sometimes it doesn't need to be a grand response to it. It could be the simplest, smallest thing, like picking
Yes.
out a coloring book and just starting to color again with your niece or by yourself to get out of or to melt away, like you said, the creative block. So Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, friend, and also curious, like, was there a moment as you were combining the two, one new endeavors almost? Oh yeah, no, they were new endeavors about a month and a half ago, but was there a sense of like a sensory overload and combining two things at once and then going full blown launch mode on both? And do you think that played into your creative block in any way?
Yeah, that's a really great question, friend. In reflection, I think it was the lack of consistency with
Hmm.
both of them.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when it comes to writing, I was really flowing with the highs of the inspiration. So I'm like, oh, I feel really inspired. I'm going to write now. So then when there was the lows of inspiration and I literally could not bring myself to write in that moment, I hadn't, found ways to, things in my toolkit that will help me out of that. Because it was the first few, like you said, it was like a month and a half ago. I jump in, had a lot of that spur. And I do think a moment like this needed to happen, to be honest. I
Yeah.
felt like it needed to happen because it it really shows like how easily we can get comfortable in our own routines. And even when I think about like the past 5 weeks, I've been getting so much joy from roller derby. Every like I'm gonna go to practice today, and I'll probably still have a lot of fun. Well, by fun is relative because I'm like it's a new hobby, so I'm struggling. But I have fun in that I'm present in my body. I'm like
Yes.
really present in what I'm doing. So fun in that regard. But I got really comfortable that, oh, this will just be my dedicated time. And I didn't realize that I was, once I stopped going to skating, whether it was in the tennis court close by, whether it was just in my like at home with my niece, like it stopped feeding into like just my general creativity,
Mm-hmm.
because it became something that it was on my routine. I'm doing derby, that's it. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I think it's a good acknowledgement, because I think there's times in my life where I've stayed very routine based when it comes to even like work, or like going, like I'm just going to go on a run. And I usually find that when you're not bringing in creativity or spurts of creativity into your life, you do feel there's a moment when I have felt that I had become stagnant after a long time in that routine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've realized that for me, creativity is something that it just empowers me to not feel stagnant in my life journey and stagnant in my larger creative life project. And so in acknowledging that, it really brings into focus, ways where I can continue to have fun with my hobby, and it doesn't become
Yes.
something that is now just routine based and I'm doing every Wednesday
Yes.
at this dedicated time. It's something that I need to embed into my daily life. Whether it's just like I'm putting on my skates in the living room, and which was what I would do. I'd put music videos and just put
Yeah, I
my
remember
skates in
you
my living
saying
room,
that. You saying
and
that.
those small ways. So yeah, friend, I don't know if that it didn't fully answer your question,
No, yeah, it did. Mm-hmm.
but I think it was like a bit of a culmination and a realization.
Yeah, I think when as I was listening to you speak, words that came to mind was like pacing and then
Yes.
consistency with the pace of the
Mhm.
creative spurts. So that like yeah, like you mentioned, so that it doesn't become like just a routine of things you did, but the pacing of the creativity of the spurts is really important to continue that creative momentum and that creative like journey, because
Mhm.
it could be never ending, it could be always an iteration or just an evolution for each step of the way, like as you
Yes.
progress with your writing, with the blogging, and as you progress to eventually making a like racing in your derby team,
Yes,
being part of
yes.
the races and the competitions. I'm sure you'll experience a different type of pacing that you might need in those moments. So
Yeah, Franny, I really appreciate that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think pacing and consistency are the two keywords that I'm working on when it comes to just my general journey of creativity. And it does make me reflect on, the creators that we've chatted with and how they typically have so many different things they're doing at once.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those way that these small, those small ways we invest in our creativity do bring, I acknowledge that that does bring so much momentum and inspiration that makes me feel like, in the creative journey, it makes it more fun.
Exactly. And I guess like to wrap us up and for our audience and listeners out there, like what does pacing look like
Mm.
for y'all in terms of in pursuit of your creative life project or just pursuit of hobbies and passions, and what does consistency look like in the midst of this pacing and in the life projects and the creativity and again in just the hobbies and passions that you have. Thanks for tuning in. Creative Hora is a podcast production hosted by Dalia Zaragoza and Mary Figueroa. This episode is edited by Abdullah Kawish and is produced by akstudio.global.